Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the 20 by 20 Wellbeing Challenge Season 2. This is your host Shazia, and I know you all must be wondering where my co host is, Angal Shamil. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, but he will be here with us tomorrow. But for today, you'll all give me the company that I need. As sent in the group already, we have another interesting session lined up for you today. And as always, like every other topic, it will embody the beautiful quote by Imam Ali, which is, "You presume you are a small entity, but within you is enfolded the entire universe." And because we mentioned a bit of about gratitude yesterday, before we bring on our speaker, I'd like to thank Dubai Jamaat and the Wellbeing team, as well as the media team behind the scenes, for giving us this platform to destigmatize mental health. So thank you. And of course, thank you to our audience for always being here every single day. And of course, for those who aren't here live, our sessions are all recorded, and inshallah, they will be shared as soon as we can. So, should we introduce our speaker for today? Without further ado, let's introduce our speaker. Yes, today we have Dr. Teizeem Dhanji. Dr. Teizeem is a systematically trained child and adolescent psychiatrist with specialist experience in eating disorders. Her passion lies in working with individuals, their families, and networks to improve psychological, physical, and social well-being. She believes all young people should have access to treatment early so as to achieve the best outcomes. After obtaining a medical degree in the UK, she went on to complete her core psychiatry and specialist child and adolescent training at the renowned Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust. After briefly working in Abu Dhabi, Dr. Teizeem joined Lighthouse Arabia, where her services were very popular. She now plies her trade with Sage Clinics and is an instrumental asset to the team. And the topic for today is emotions in young people. So let's all welcome Dr. Teizeem Dhanji. Are you with us here? Salam
Assalamu
alaikum.
alaikum. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and also thank you for the introduction, and thank you to you and Shamil for putting all this together. I think last year it was such a success, and
Yes,
this year it's just
absolutely.
got better. So thank you.
Thank you so much. The floor is all yours, please.
Okay. So I'm going to be sharing some slides in a moment, but I guess I wanted to start with a reflection. I want you to have a bit of a reflection for yourselves. There's a question I'd like to ask, and we'll come back to this question, but looking at the question from a child's perspective. So initially, if you can just reflect a little bit yourselves on your experiences of emotion as a child, dependent on the kind of parenting that you had, the upbringing, your school situation, peer relationships. I want you to reflect, just take a few minutes and reflect on how you experienced emotions, how you reacted to emotions, and how that has been shaped throughout your life to how you now experience your emotions and react to them. Okay, and we'll come back to this reflection in a moment. So take some time to do that while I try to share my screen. Okay, is that working?
I think not yet. Yes. Now we can see your screen shared.
Can you see the presentation?
You can see it? No, not yet, not yet. Switch, I think you can switch your tab, right?
Okay, so hold on, I may have to share it on this 1 second.
Yeah. I think I remember your session last year, and I was on the other side.
Oh, you are?
And yes, yeah. I was doing the Kahoot and listening to the speakers. So I think one of your sessions was one of the brilliant ones that I took away a lot from. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, we can see it. Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay, so hopefully you've had a few minutes to have that reflection, and as I said, we'll come back to it, but from the perspective of a child towards the end of the presentation. So one of the things that, before kind of having a talk on emotions in children, I think it's important to think about, why do we need emotions? Because actually emotions serve a function, and whether the emotions are good or bad or difficult to experience, we all need to be able to have emotions in order to sometimes have a specific outcome. So the problem is not the emotion itself, but it's sometimes how we react or respond to the emotion, maybe our behavior, which can be helpful or unhelpful. So some of the reasons why we need emotion is because, as I said, it's an important way to be able to express ourselves, either verbally or non-verbally. Sometimes it might be a motivator. So for instance, if you're feeling tired or you're feeling hungry, it can motivate you to either get some sleep or food. Emotions are really important for connection and that bonding. So whether that be in friendships, relationships, within your families, it's really important to be able to have emotional connection. And in some cases, it can be used as protection as well. So you can imagine that a time where you might be feeling really scared, and your response to that feeling or that emotion of being scared is to either run away or to, they say kind of fight or flight response. So for these reasons, our emotions are really important. And as I said, it just depends on how we then experience the emotions ourselves. How do we experience other people's emotions, and then how do we react to that? So this is something that I really like to do with young people and parents, because if we look at emotions as having a function, then we need to try and identify what is that function, because often what we're seeing is the behavior. So if you think about an iceberg, usually there's a little part of the iceberg that's above the water, but there's a huge part of the ice under the water. And often that's the part that we don't see, but we need to be able to keep space for. So for instance, if I give you an example of maybe like a 2-year-old who's in a supermarket aisle, maybe in the middle of Carrefour having a tantrum, the behavior you might be seeing is like kicking and screaming, shouting, maybe they're having a tantrum. But how many times do parents try to understand what's underneath that emotion? Because at the same time as the child having that emotion, the parent is also experiencing lots of emotion. It might be frustration, irritation. It might be that the parent is feeling shamed or embarrassed because of the child's behavior. Maybe they're starting to get kind of like mum guilt, or feeling that other people are judging them. And so often in those situations, it's really hard to be able to connect with a young person, to be able to understand what is it that's leading to that type of behavior. Because just as you might be tired, or just as you might have certain emotions, people say that often if you've not had something to eat, that you can get hangry. Well, similarly, it might be that the child is having some type of emotion, and this is the only way that they're able to express that emotion. And then thinking a little bit about, well, what are the developmental considerations? Because one thing that a lot of people are really surprised to hear or understand or think about is that actually a child's brain is not fully developed. In fact, the brain doesn't fully develop until around the age of 25. So if we think about some of the parts of the brain that are involved in regulating emotion or impulse control, well, these parts of the brain aren't developed until a much later time, when you're sort of later adults or early adulthood. So we can't expect that a young person, even a 15, 16-year-old, is going to be able to, in any situation, think logically like an adult would think. Often adults are able to sort of say that, well, if I'm angry in the situation, I might not get what I need. I might not get my point across. And so they're able to regulate their emotions to be able to get what they need in that moment. But children aren't able to do this. And children are still developing that capacity to be able to communicate their needs and also regulate their emotions. So what you have in your toolbox is you have the power to be able to help children to learn. Because often children are actually better learners than adults. Adults become stuck in their ways. It's difficult for them to learn new ways to be, whereas children are much better at being able to learn. So you can actually help them to identify their emotions. You can help them to communicate and regulate their emotions. And doing some role playing, being a good role model can help with that. You also need to think a little bit about some of the hormonal changes that would be happening in that period of time. So, childhood and early adolescence, there's a lot of hormonal changes that are happening. You've also got lots of transitions, things like going from primary school to secondary school, changes in terms of, friendships, people moving, like older siblings going to university, maybe difficulties in parental relationships. So there are a lot of transitions that happen during this period of childhood and adolescence, and it's important to take all of those things into consideration. So this is a really, really nice diagram, and it's often how I explain to young people and their parents about the brain. So if we look at it as, the upstairs brain, and this is your thinking brain, this is the frontal cortex just here. This is the part that allows you to control impulses. It allows you to problem solve. It allows you to have some critical thinking, think logically, try and plan. This is the part that is still developing, and it takes a lot of time to kind of develop. So it's not developed in adolescence. And then you've got the downstairs brain, which is more the emotional brain. So this is the amygdala. You've got the sort of limbic system, and this is involved in expression of emotions. It's involved in trying to regulate feelings, any memories or attachments that you have. So how sometimes we might have emotions that are attached to a certain situation or a memory. So similarly, those things are sort of still developing in a child. Okay, so if we've got this downstairs brain and this upstairs brain, and everyone has it, even as adults, we're sometimes thinking from our upstairs brain and sometimes we're thinking from our downstairs brain. So the way I like to look at it is, how do we help children, but also adults, to move from their downstairs brain to their upstairs brain? So you can imagine sort of steps. And what you're doing is you're trying to give them those building blocks of how do they react in any kind of situation from their upstairs brain rather than reacting from a downstairs brain. So rather than, not being regulated, shouting, screaming, not being able to kind of express or communicate their emotions, how do you walk them up to be able to control their impulses, problem solve, be more logical, and sort of react from their thinking brain? And then the other thing to note is that, whilst this is structural in terms of the brain, is that we also have neurotransmitters and hormones which affect how our body reacts. So if we're feeling scared, for instance, we're feeling afraid, levels of cortisol are high in stress environments. And so what happens is that the cortisol makes our blood pressure rise, it makes our heart beat fast, it makes us sweat and feel shaky. And the opposite is true. So oxytocin is another chemical which is released when you're trying to bond with somebody. So if you're giving someone a hug, you're trying to get a connection with somebody, you get oxytocin released. And actually that helps your body to really calm down. It helps you to feel lighter, helps your blood pressure and your heart rate to reduce. So all of these things are at play when we're thinking about the emotions and how it's connected to the brain and then also our physiology. So what is emotional regulation? Well, it's really difficult. It's a skill that's acquired. So it's something that you can learn, and you learn through your experiences, you learn through your surroundings, as you're a child to becoming an adult. These are things that are role modeled. So depending on how do you experience your parents regulating their emotions? Sometimes I'll get children who come and are having behavioral problems, and often one of the parents will say, yeah, the child is just like their dad or just like their mum in terms of how they respond to situations. So often that role modeling is something that we pick up. And the emotional regulation is a skill that can be acquired, and it is something that helps us to tolerate our emotions and also tolerate other people's emotions. So what you're wanting to do when you're regulating your emotions, rather than going from 0 to 100, we want to be able to reduce the intensity that we feel in emotion. Now, in some cases, in some situations, it's important to feel like a high intensity of that emotion. So, let's say you're being robbed, you definitely want to flee that situation. So it's important to have high intense emotions there. You don't want to necessarily freeze, you want to be able to run. Whereas sometimes, let's say you're scared of spiders and there's a spider in a meeting room where you're in a meeting full of lots of people. It's not appropriate really to scream and shout and kind of run around the room. You don't want to sort of run away, but you want to have a measured response. And so it's important to be able to control your reactions to the situation by reducing how intense you feel that emotion. And all of this, in terms of regulating your emotions, it helps us to feel emotions in a more comforting way and in a way that is good for our well-being. So for parents, and I think this talk is going to be really good because I think tomorrow's talk is about possibly something about parenting. So I think this lends well to what the talk is going to be tomorrow. But in order for any parent to be able to offer guidance and discipline, you have to have some building blocks with your young person. So there has to be a sense that the young person is feeling safe and protected, feeling able to share their emotions without being judged, that there's a mutual warmth between the parent and the young person. And only when these building blocks are there can you guide and can you discipline. Because of course boundaries are really important in parenting, and actually children do need boundaries, but they need the boundaries to come from compassion, because otherwise often there is that sort of block. Either the child isn't understanding, or it feels the child feels the parent doesn't understand how they're feeling. So really coming from a place where there is some warmth and the child is feeling safe and protected, then allows for you to be able to guide and discipline. So this is really nice because it shows what we would call the hierarchy of needs. And what it means is that sometimes it's going to be really hard for someone to achieve, like a child, to achieve good self-esteem, a sense of achievement and good confidence if some of the needs below are not met. So how can a child feel accomplished and have good self-esteem and confidence if they don't feel any love and belonging, if they don't feel physically safe, if they're not in an environment where they have shelter or they have food to eat? It's really hard to be able to to get those higher levels of needs met if the lower levels of needs aren't met. And what I would say is that, similarly, if you're trying to help guide a young person in terms of trying to regulate their emotions and trying to have good sense of well-being, achievement, and confidence, then trying to explore with them how can we make sure that that friendships are good, that you're feeling socially accepted, you're not feeling lonely, you're feeling a sense of loving, medically everything's okay, you're getting enough sleep, and you're eating well. Being able to do those things are going to lend then for a young person to be able to have better confidence. And if you can superimpose this onto the iceberg, because actually some of those needs or those emotions aren't being met or recognized in terms of maybe whatever the emotions are underneath the iceberg, which means that then it's the behavior that you're seeing. And to be able to try and work out, well, what are those needs that need to be met? It's those emotions, but it's also some of these more physical needs. Okay, so I've got a few more slides, but eventually then we can just get into some more dialogue and questions. But I guess I want to give you something to go away with and to try and think about, well, what does emotional coaching mean? How do you help someone to regulate their emotions? And as I said, if some of the often parents, their initial thing is to go and problem solve. So if I give you an example of maybe a young person who is in the middle of their GCSEs, feeling really stressed, and they come home and you hear from school that they've had a fight with somebody. Okay, the initial thing for a parent is, and this might not always be the case, but it might be that a parent becomes really angry, is sort of saying, you could get expelled. What if you're going to ruin your GCSEs? You're not going to amount to anything. How do we solve this problem now? You need to make sure that you go and apologize. You need to make sure that you are spending 6 hours revising every day, all of these things. And so actually in that, if you go straight to the problem solving, that's when young people don't feel heard, because they haven't had you check in with them in terms of what's happened, how are they feeling, why is it that this happened, could it have been that the stress of the exams was too much, could it have been that another one of their needs wasn't being met, or someone has been bullying them for weeks and weeks. Try and tune into what their emotions are, validate that emotion, give them a safe space, which is non-judgmental, to be able to come to you with their emotions and how they're feeling, so that you can have that connection first of all. Okay, once that connection is made, that's when you can do the discipline and the boundary setting. But in the absence of making that connection, in the absence of helping them to feel heard, it's really hard to do that. And so one of the ways you can help them to feel heard is by labeling the feelings, summarizing what they've said. So you might say to them, okay, so I understand that this situation happened, and I can see it's made you really upset. I can see that you're really stressed. I've been able to see that you're stressed in the last few weeks. That connection helps the young person feel like they're being understood, and then you can try and think about what the problem solving is. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to, in the situation of them getting into a fight, what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to validate their emotion. So I can understand that maybe what this person said to you made you really, really angry, made you frustrated. And at the moment, your capacity is not great because you're so stressed with the exams. So you validate the emotion, but you don't want to necessarily validate the behavior, which would have been the fight. And that's how you can be compassionate, but still boundaried. So I'll quickly go through this, but a lot of us have like an inner critic. So it's not just for young people, but it's also adults. And if we think about some of the experiences that we've had, sometimes we get into these cycles that then become self-fulfilling. So for instance, if a young person thinks, I'm stupid, I never get anything right, I don't understand the work, and so then they don't do the homework that they're given, what that means is they fall further behind. They don't they get bad marks, they don't feel like they're accomplishing anything, they feel guilt, maybe they get shamed by other students, and then it just adds to that cycle of them feeling even dumber, just feeling like they're not accomplishing anything, that they can't get anything right. And so this cycle of negative self-talk and this inner critic, it's like an inner bully, gets worse and worse without there being any kind of room for things to change, and it becomes self-fulfilling, like I said. So you don't do the homework, you feel even worse about yourself. Whereas what we can do is we can try to think about, well, where does that come from? Does it come from different experiences that they've had? Have they been bullied? Is it an expectation from parents? Is it an expectation from school? Because that's a huge thing right now, especially in some of the more academic schools. Where does this inner critic come from them? And then how do you help for them to sort of coach, to have an inner coach? So this is the positive self-talk, which is a bit more of a balanced way to look at things. Okay, I might not understand, but I'm learning. I can try to do my homework. It's hard. Maybe I need to ask for help, but then I can feel proud that I got it done. I'm not going to feel that I'm, lagging behind. I might not do as well, but maybe I can get some feedback on where I need to kind of make some improvements. At least I'm trying to learn. I'm trying my best. And how often, do parents say to children, just try your best? That's really important, isn't it? And you can role model some of those things by also, if you find that you get into your own kind of inner critic, how do you look at a more balanced way of that sort of critic, and a balanced view of the negative self-talk, so that you're able to coach yourself and do that in front of your children, to be able to help them to also role model that. So I think there's one more slide left, but before I go to that, I just want everyone to think a little bit about the reflection that I gave earlier on. So earlier on, you were thinking from your perspective, in terms of your parenting and your experiences in early childhood. How do you now experience emotion, and how do you react in response to emotion? Now I just want you to take a step back and think about maybe current children or future children. In 20 years' time, if I was asking that same question to your child, how would you want them to respond? How would you want them to respond in terms of how their parenting or experience of parenting, so basically you parenting them, had led to their current experiences of emotion and how they express and react to emotion? Because I think if we look at sort of maybe generations before us, it was very common, wasn't it, to be told that actually emotions aren't good, to try to dampen our emotions in certain situations, that if you're emotional, you're too weak. These things come through in terms of generational, I won't say trauma, but generational conversations. So I want you to think about and reflect on, maybe when you have some time, is how would you want your children to be saying that they now experience emotion based on your parenting? Okay. And then lastly, I'm just going to leave this here really for you to see, but this is something that, across the ages, young people to adults can really try to manage emotions in a really sort of balanced way. It's about reducing the emotional intensity, as we talked about in terms of emotional regulation, is going for a mindful walk. So you're using the environment and you're using your senses to be able to reduce that intensity of emotions, not going from 0 to 100, but giving yourself some time to be in the here and now, maybe experience the emotion, but then also bring that emotion down to be able to regulate. And I think a lot of parents will come and say that they've tried this with their kids at a very young age, and initially when they're doing it with sort of like 7-8-year-olds, it's like a fun activity, but then it becomes that it's the 16-year-old goes and does this on their own because it's a way that they're coping. So you can just go for a walk with your child, help them, because in the past they've got there's lots of techniques, aren't there? Things like the naughty step, or thinking about anger thermometers and things like that. And some of those things are a bit outdated. So being able to be with your child and help them to be more mindful and regulate in the moment is actually a really helpful thing that they can do. And it helps them to be able to kind of take this through to adulthood as well. So because I've not been able to see any of the screen, so I'm just going to hopefully come back.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is fine. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sister Teizeem. I think the reflection question that you asked us at the beginning and at the end, very crucial and important questions to ask, because like you said, it's not necessarily just generational trauma, it's generational conversations as well. We tend to pass on what we have learned or how we were treated, and so on and so forth. And I think it's very, very important that we try and break the cycle as much as we can and be better parents to our future children. And I think that's very important. So thank you so much for that. We're going to move on to the Kahoot for now. So please do stay with us. We're going to come back for a Q&A session where we have lots of questions for you. So let's move on to the Kahoot for now. Yes, so before we go to the Kahoot, we have the leaderboard. Yes, and in first place, we have Zara Juma at 34,018 points. In second place, we have Sister Nazneen, 33,939 points. And in third place, we have Sister Rosemary Wazir, 33,477 points. I think the points are very close to one another. Fourth and fifth also are quite close. So keep trying, keep playing, and fastest fingers first. And we can start with our Kahoot for today. So the Kahoot for day 9. The game pin is 168974. And there's a QR code as well. We're going to give a few seconds for everyone to join in. Please do log in with your full names or the names that you have been using for the past 8 days, because that is how we can keep up with your scores. Thank you to everyone who signs up every day, takes the time out as part of your day, and we really do hope you find your universe within you. Okay, we'll give it a few seconds. Once again, the game pin is 168974. Okay, I think we're good to go, right? Yeah, okay. Okay, let's start for today. Kahoot, question number 1, day 9. Select the right combination. Is it oxytocin and bonding, or is it stress and bonding? You have 30 seconds. I think everyone knows this answer. 5 more seconds. And yes, it's oxytocin and bonding, which is a hormone. Very good. We have question number 2. At what age does the brain fully develop? Is it A, 13, start of teenage years? Is it B, 20, end of teenage years? Is it C, 25, quarter of a century? Or is it D, always developing? Yes, it's C, 25, quarter of a century. Question number 3. Select the right combination. Is it frontal cortex and downstairs brain, or is it frontal cortex and upstairs brain? Is it the downstairs brain or is it the upstairs brain? Which is it? Yes, it's B, correct. Frontal cortex and the upstairs brain. Very well done. I think majority of you were really listening. Question number 4. Which of the below is not a hierarchy of need? Is it A, belonging? Is it B, safety? Is it C, food? Or is it D, gains? Which of the below is not a hierarchy? Ten more seconds. We have all our answers. Yes, it's D, games. And for question number 5, select the false answer. Emotional coaching requires to A, validate, B, connect, C, make assumptions, or D, listen. Remember, it's the false answer. Quite tricky there. Yes, it's C, make assumptions. And we have our final question for today, which is based on the activity list. In day 9 activity, it mentions to spend some time in nature. What were the examples given? Is it Jumeirah Lakes? Is it the beach? Is it Jabal Jais Mountains? Or is it Ras Al Khor Wildlife Sanctuary? Yes, it's B, the beach. Very well done to everyone. I see you're all doing the well-being activities. In third place, we have Sister Rosemin Wazir. In second place, we have Sister Sajida Khwaja. And in first place, we have Sister Sayyida Masuma. Very well done to all the ladies. Very well done. I think we can move on to our Q&A session. Thank you, Sister Teizeem, for the wait. You can all, for the audience, you can all ask us questions and we will be sure to answer these questions. So before we go to the audience's questions, I'd like to ask you, which is a very common question actually when we think about emotions. How would you define emotional intelligence? And how important is it?
Yeah, so I think as with emotions in other contexts, this is something that you can learn as well. So some people have higher emotional intelligence compared to other people, just naturally, in terms of, some people might have higher resilience than other people. But it's also a skill that you can learn. So emotional intelligence is the awareness of your own emotions, other people's emotions, the awareness of the effect of your emotions on other people. So it's being able to have more of that sort of meta view of what how you're reacting in situations, how that might affect somebody else, how somebody else might be reacting. Can you have an awareness of why they might be doing something, and being able to be sort of intelligent in that emotional awareness.
Okay, thank you so much for that. There is a question that I had as well. When someone bottles up feelings, and often this starts at a young age, right? We're taught not to show a lot of emotions. We're taught not to show a lot of feelings, especially when we're around other family members, for example. How detrimental is bottling emotions up, especially when you're doing it from a young age and then it becomes quite a habit, and as an adult you don't really know how to manage those emotions. How detrimental can that be?
Yeah. There's so many like analogies that pop up when you say that in terms of bottling up emotions. So I can think of like, like a pressure cooker, and I can think of one that I use with younger children is like, a bottle of like fizzy Coke or something. So if you shake it a little bit, it gets a little bit fizzy. If you shake it really hard, it gets really fizzy, and to the point that it's going to blow if you let the lid off. And so, you know, bottling up your emotions is a difficult thing to do because it means that you're not able to communicate your needs. Okay, so you have some needs you're not able to communicate. We talked about all of the reasons why emotions are good and why we all need emotions. So even the good emotion, but the bad emotion as well, or the less not helpful, but the more distressing emotions, that they're also really important because it helps us to connect with people. It helps us to get what we need. It helps us to communicate. Helps us to protect ourselves. And so if we're bottling up our emotion, we're not able to allow people, close to us to be able to respond in a way that we need them to respond. It gets to a point where that bucket gets full, or the pressure cooker, goes, blows, because at some point we're not going to be able to continue to manage to keep a lid on that emotion. And then often what will happen, and you'll see this a lot in kind of like relationships and friendships and sometimes work situations, is that things will be like bubbling a little bit. It's like a bit of I don't know, tea that's like on the stove, and it's like bubbling away, and then suddenly things pop, and people don't understand really, well, why is that person having that reaction? That reaction is often not it's not in proportion to what's happened, because it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. So I
Yeah.
think it can be detrimental in some ways because you're not communicating your needs. You're also not getting, if you're not communicating your needs, you're not getting your needs met.
Right, absolutely. And then in certain situations, you, even if it's not a big deal, because you have bottled those emotions, I think that's what you're trying to say. Yes, we
Yeah,
make it a big deal, and the other person doesn't understand why, right?
yeah. Or it could
Okay.
be like a small thing that means that you then explode, but actually it's not that small thing. It's everything before that.
Right. Exactly. We do have a question from the audience. How do we cope up with the fear of being something we don't want to be? For example, how does one make sure they are not continuing to behave the way the elders did, which wasn't fair every time? So basically, I think it means how do we break the cycle of the previous generation?
Yeah. So here you're talking about the fear of being something that you don't want to be,
Right.
because of what the elders did. So, um, yeah, a lot of this is just about awareness. So if you are aware of yourself, if you have that emotional intelligence, you're able to kind of be aware of how you're reacting, how you experience your emotions, and you can dig deep, because that's important. So you want to be able to understand, actually, what is it in my past? What is it in terms of what the elders may have done, your experiences. Not, I don't want to say that all of this is to do with parenting, because it absolutely isn't. People have difficult experiences in schools, they have different experiences just throughout life. So what are those experiences that somebody's had that has meant that they're in the situation that they're in at the moment? And once you're aware of those things, then you can try and think about, how do you undo some of those patterns of coping, those patterns of expressing emotions, or the patterns of bottling up emotions, not communicating how you're feeling. So that awareness is key, digging deep to try and understand how you're in that situation, and then working towards making some of those changes, because you can only make changes when you're aware of what needs to be changed, and how it got there in the first place. Because you might have to actually be a bit boundaried with, for instance, let's say if you're let's say you were brought up in a situation where it was not okay to express emotion. If you expressed emotions, that meant you were weak. And then you get married and you're in a situation with your husband where you're playing that out. So you don't express emotions because otherwise it might make you weak in front of him. Okay, so you've done the kind of thinking, you know where it comes from. How do you then change the situation that you're currently in? Because actually that's what he's used to, that's what you've played out, that's what, that's how he got to know you, that you are this kind of person. And how do you do it in a safe and containing way? And a lot of that is about some of the things we talked about in terms of helping someone regulate. So maybe your husband has to be very aware that this is something that you're trying to work on. How does he help you to be able to express? Because you might then express and still have these feelings, oh, am I being weak? But he has to give you that reassurance. I'm really glad that you told me that this is how you're feeling. I'm really glad that you communicated this to me. I'm thankful that you're letting me know, rather than him reacting in a way that maybe your parents might have reacted or you've experienced in the past. That's to do that is, it's really important to kind of think of those steps. I hope that's
Definitely. Yeah, I think it does. And it also says that support from family and your closed ones is also very important when one knows that you have been through such emotions while growing up. Because you spoke about validation, so just Teizeem, tell me, is all type of validation or seeking validation negative?
So I look at validation in a very different way. So I think maybe the way that it's interpreted there is validation is attention seeking, whereas that's not how I would necessarily see validation. So validation is just helping someone to understand, because you can be there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. So empathy is when somebody understands how you're feeling or tries to put themselves in your shoes rather than feeling pity for you. Okay, so similarly, when you're validating someone, you want to get that sense of that they're understanding me. And you can only get that if they're validating how you're feeling, because if they are telling you, or you're feeling non-validated, so they're telling you that, well, you're feeling angry or you're feeling upset, but I don't think that situation means that you should be upset. That is not validating for the person. But you can say to them, you may not agree, but you can say to them, I really understand that you're feeling upset because of the situation. I can understand that that's how you feel. I can see that's how you're feeling. I think you're valid in being able to having that feeling of being upset at that situation. Maybe once they've felt understood, then you can say, if you don't agree, that, even though I think, it's, of course, your feelings, how you feel is valid. Okay, that's your feeling. No one can take that away from you. But let's think about a different way of how you might have reacted in that situation. Let's think about, if I was in that situation, how might I have felt? If somebody else was in that situation, how might they have felt? So you can help them to look at different ways of feeling. But always that validation is necessary to be able to do that connection.
I understand that part. The fact that you brought up sympathy and empathy as well, it was one of my questions. What is the difference between them and how important is empathy? But when we do come across empathy, we have something known as the empathy fatigue, right? When someone's constantly empathizing with people. How would you describe to our audience what empathy fatigue is?
So I guess in the situation that you're describing, it's probably that sometimes it can be very emotionally draining to be in a situation where you're having to always be in a position of trying to be empathic. Okay, so if I think about it in my job, from 9 to 6, whatever timings I'm working, I'm consistently needing to be available, to be empathic to my patients who are coming to see me, to be understanding, to be able to put myself in their shoes, to be able to connect with them and then help them move through something. That can be really tiring. It can be really difficult, especially, imagine sort of being in a room with very unwell young people, someone who's very depressed. And so what they're doing is they're projecting a lot of their feeling of either loneliness, sadness, upset, distress. We have a sense of projecting those feelings, whatever we're feeling, we have a sense of projecting those feelings to the people that we're talking to. And so there can be some tiredness related to, or fatigue related to, empathy. And sometimes people then switch into either problem solving or being less empathic, maybe even being quite cruel, or dismissive, because of that fatigue. So having boundaries is probably something that's really important. So I have boundaries in terms of I leave work at work, but for somebody, it might be a loved one or someone that you're a family member or a friend or something, that actually you can probably have boundaries with that person. You don't want to be on the phone for 5 hours every night trying to console them, or be an empathic voice. You can try to keep boundaries so that you're able to continue to keep your capacity of being empathic in that interaction.
Okay. We do have another question. Are there any societal expectations or gender norms related to expressing emotions? So, for example, when it comes to the male gender, and because we have toxic masculinity, and we often speak about that, and in that terminology, we have men who cannot, who basically, when they express their emotions or when it comes to crying, it's a big stigma. How would you express this, or how do you think this works, if there are any?
Yeah. Again, this is as old as it is in terms of cavemen and being providers and things like that. So I think through generations, of course, things have changed, and people are more, males are more able to express their emotions. They're more able to communicate their emotions, whereas previously it would have been seen as actually being weak and being not the protector and not the person who has the capacity to be the most resilient in whatever relationship. So if you think about a family dynamic, the father has to be the resilient. He can't be the one who's emotional. Otherwise everything around him breaks up. We experience it in so many situations, from religion, women not necessarily going to the graveyard. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
It's because of the ability, or the showing of emotion. Okay, so, and I don't think these things are necessarily bad things, because just as sometimes, I think it's really woke to be kind of like everyone's equal and things like that, but actually there are
Yeah.
differences between males and females, and positions that people hold in families and through society and generations. So I definitely think that those positions and those things are important because they serve purposes. But I think the generations are moving towards being able to not stigmatize it as much, or not be as judgmental towards, let's say, like a male who is more expressive of their emotions, because at the end of the day we all need to communicate, don't we all need to be able to find that connection. So I think what society is doing is it's moving towards being able to allow that space for people to do that and to less destigmatize it. But what more can I think we can do more by trying to help people to be more emotionally intelligent and to again understand where their way of connecting with emotion comes from. That can be something that can help for themselves to destigmatize, because actually some of it might be society, but some of it is self-imposed as well, right? So there'll be males or other people. It doesn't only have to be males. It could be in a certain corporate environment, for instance, you can't be very emotional, or in certain families, depending on how families are set up, it might be that you can't be the one that's emotional. You have to be the one that people are depending on for their emotional regulation. So I think working out and trying to think about how you fit in, and where you can find that space to be able to express more is an important thing. And I do think it's it's less stigmatizing now.
Yeah, definitely. We have time for one last question, because I do want to end it on a bit of a positive note with positive emotions. What are some of the ways to cultivate positive emotions in our daily lives?
So we have a tendency as humans to highlight and maximize the things that happen in life that are negative. So we stick on to, like, just think about your general day. Somebody could not open the door for you, or make a remark, and that could stick with you the whole day. And we really lose sight of some of the positive things that happen. So maybe someone gave you a smile, or asked you if you wanted a cup of tea, and we don't pick up on those things because we're tuned to be able to sort of focus on more of the negative things. So I think to be able to try and cultivate more positive emotion, I think it's really important to help yourself to tune in better to those positive things that happen. In a way, I think this may have been discussed in previous, or at least it was one of the tasks, that gratitude journaling is really helpful to do that.
Yeah.
So if you go home and every day you look at 3 things, something that made you feel proud, made you feel accomplished, something positive that had happened, a positive comment someone made, a positive situation, something where you felt good about yourself. And if you do this consistently every day, going home and thinking, what were the 3 things that really happened that were actually positive? What you're going to find that over the weeks is that you focus less on those negative things, and you're able to bring your attention better to the times where something positive happens, because your brain is like in tune with those things. So you're more aware of, you're fostering that awareness, and then it becomes that actually you're feeling much more of those positive emotions through the day, because you're more aware of the positive, and less those negative things it doesn't phase you.
Yeah, definitely. We make positivity, we're more aware of our positive emotions, and anything that we highlight our positive emotions more than we should highlight our negative emotions. I think it's very crucial. Thank you so much, Sister Teizeem. I wish we had more time to talk about this more, but that'll be all for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think our audience has also felt a lot of emotions, mixed emotions, and I'm sure they're all positive ones. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as always, please do the well-being activities and try and as Sister Teizeem put it really well, that these activities actually do help us, especially when it comes to journaling as well. And it is the last activity, but if you can, please do start now. So as always, we're going to end with the book. Can we have our book on screen? Yeah, today we have What I Know for Sure by Oprah Winfrey. And the excerpt that we have chosen is: the truth is that the naysayers in your life can never be fully satisfied. Whether you hide or shine, they'll always feel threatened because they don't believe they are enough. So stop paying attention to them. Every time you suppress some part of yourself or allow others to play you small, you are ignoring the owner's manual your creator gave you. What I know for sure is this: you are built not to shrink down to less, but to blossom into more, to be more splendid, to be more extraordinary, to use every moment to fill yourself up. And with that, we'll wrap up today's session. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back with another riveting session with my co host tomorrow. So for now, good night, God bless, and don't forget your watermelons for the day. Thank you.